The shocking truth about modern meat spoilage. Walk into any modern kitchen and open the refrigerator. You'll find neatly sealed meat, wrapped in plastic, stamped with dates, labels, and promises of safety. Everything looks clean, controlled, and advanced. Yet despite all this technology, modern meat has one major weakness. It spoils incredibly fast. Within days, sometimes even hours, the smell changes, the texture softens, and bacteria begin to take over. This reality feels normal to us, but historically, it would have been unthinkable. In the medieval world, meat spoilage was not a minor inconvenience. It was a life or death issue. There were no grocery stores, no freezers, and no second chances. If meat spoiled, hunger followed, and hunger led to weakness, illness, and often death. Because of this pressure, medieval societies developed preservation systems that were brutally efficient. They didn't rely on convenience, they relied on chemistry, environment, and discipline. Modern meat is designed for speed. Animals are raised quickly, slaughtered quickly, processed quickly, and sold quickly. The goal is turnover, not endurance. Moisture is retained to increase weight. Mild curing keeps flavor soft. Packaging focuses on appearance rather than longevity. This creates a perfect environment for microbial growth. Bacteria thrive in warm, moist, oxygen-rich conditions, exactly what modern meat provides. Medieval meat was treated very differently. The moment an animal was slaughtered, preservation began immediately. Water was removed, salt was applied heavily, smoke penetrated deep into muscle fibers. Meat was exposed to cold air, dry environments, and controlled fermentation. These processes didn't just slow spoilage, they fundamentally changed the chemical structure of the meat. What shocks modern viewers is not that medieval meat lasted long. What shocks them is how reliable it was. Properly cured meat could survive years without refrigeration. It could be transported across long distances. It could sustain armies, villages, and families through brutal winters. This wasn't luck. It was applied knowledge passed down across generations. The uncomfortable truth is this: modern food systems prioritize taste, speed, and profit over resilience. Medieval systems prioritized survival. That difference alone explains why our bacon rots in days while their meat endured years. This video exists to expose that truth, calmly, scientifically, and honestly. What medieval people understood about bacteria without science. Medieval people did not know the word bacteria, but they understood its behavior better than most modern consumers. They observed patterns. They saw which foods spoiled quickly and which survived. Over centuries, trial and error turned into tradition, and tradition turned into systems. They knew moisture was dangerous. Wet meat spoiled faster. Dry meat survived longer, so they dried it aggressively. Salt was not added for taste, it was added to remove water from meat cells through osmosis. When water left the cells, bacteria lost their ability to reproduce. Without moisture, microbial life collapsed. They also understood airflow. Meat left in stagnant air spoiled. Meat hung in open, cold, moving air lasted longer. This is why smokehouses, rafters, and cellars were carefully designed. Air circulation wasn't aesthetic, it was preservation engineering. Temperature mattered deeply. Cold slowed decay. That's why winter slaughtering was common. Animals were killed when the environment itself acted as refrigeration. Cellars were dug deep into the earth where temperatures stayed stable year-round. Most importantly, medieval people understood competition between microorganisms. Fermentation was not accidental rot, it was controlled dominance. Beneficial bacteria were encouraged to grow, so harmful ones could not. This principle is still used today in cheese, yogurt, and cured meats, but medieval people applied it intuitively. They didn't fight nature blindly, they guided it. Modern society relies on machines to replace understanding. Medieval society relied on observation, and in many ways that made their systems more robust. They worked without electricity, without plastic, and without chemical preservatives. They worked because they aligned with biological reality. This heading sets the foundation for everything that follows. Medieval meat lasted because medieval people respected the rules of decay and built systems that made decay nearly impossible. Salt, the most powerful preservative in human history. Salt was more valuable than gold in many medieval societies. Entire trade routes, wars, and taxes revolved around it. This wasn't superstition or exaggeration. Salt meant survival. When salt is applied to meat, it immediately begins pulling water out of muscle tissue. This dehydration process creates an environment where bacteria cannot survive. Without water, cellular activity stops. Enzymes slow. Decay is halted. Medieval curing methods used far more salt than modern taste preferences allow. Meat was packed, buried, layered, and rubbed repeatedly. The goal was not mild flavor, it was total bacterial suppression. Over time, the salt penetrated deep into the meat, changing its structure permanently. Salt also preserved fat. Oxidation, which causes rancid smells, slows dramatically in salted environments. This allowed medieval meat to maintain caloric density, crucial during famine and winter. Salted meat wasn't eaten casually, it was soaked, cooked, diluted, and rationed. Preservation came first, pleasure came second. Smoke, chemistry disguised as tradition. Smoke preservation wasn't just drying meat over fire, it was chemical warfare against bacteria. Wood smoke contains antimicrobial compounds like phenols and formaldehyde. These substances coat the surface of meat, creating a hostile barrier against microbial life. Medieval smokehouses were designed to maximize exposure. Low fires, long smoking times, controlled airflow. The goal was penetration, not speed. Different woods produced different chemical effects. This knowledge was passed orally, refined through generations. Smoke also dried meat slowly, preventing cracking while ensuring dehydration. Modern smoking is often cosmetic. Medieval smoking was functional. That difference explains everything. Fermentation, controlling decay instead of fighting it. To modern ears, fermentation sounds dangerous. We associate it with rot, spoilage, and food gone bad. But in medieval world, fermentation was one of the most powerful tools humanity ever discovered. It wasn't decay, it was controlled transformation. And more importantly, it was protection. When medieval people fermented meat, they were not letting nature take over randomly. They were guiding it with precision. Salt levels, temperature, humidity, and time were all carefully managed. The goal was simple but profound. Allow beneficial microorganisms to dominate before harmful ones could establish themselves. This is a biological truth that medieval people understood through observation. Microbes compete. If the right bacteria take control first, they create acids, alcohols, and compounds that make the environment hostile to dangerous pathogens. Once that balance is achieved, the food becomes stable, sometimes for years. Fermented sausages are a perfect example. Meat was ground, salted heavily, sometimes mixed with spices or wine, and then packed tightly into casings. These sausages were hung in cool, controlled environments. Over time, lactic acid bacteria multiplied, lowering the pH. As acidity increased, spoilage organisms died off. What remained was a preserved, calorie-dense food that could survive long winters. This wasn't guesswork. Medieval communities guarded these techniques carefully. Families passed recipes down like inheritance. One mistake could mean illness or death. Precision mattered. Modern food systems still use fermentation, but often in diluted, shortened forms. Yogurt, cheese, and cured meats exist, but industrial timelines rush the process. Medieval fermentation respected time, and time was the secret ingredient. Fermentation also preserved nutrients. Vitamins remained intact. Proteins were pre-digested into more absorbable forms. Fatty acids stabilized. In many cases, fermented meat was healthier than fresh meat that spoiled quickly. What modern society lost is not the method, it's the patience. Fermentation requires trust in process. It requires waiting. Medieval people had no choice but to trust it because their lives depended on it. Fermentation didn't fight decay blindly, it redirected it, and that is why it worked so well. Temperature, cellars, and natural refrigeration. Before electricity, before compressors, before artificial cooling, medieval people turned the earth itself into a refrigerator. Temperature control was not accidental, it was architectural, geological, and deeply intentional. Cellars were carved deep into the ground because soil maintains a stable temperature year-round. In summer, cellars stayed cool. In winter, they stayed above freezing. This stability slowed bacterial growth dramatically. Meat stored in these environments decayed at a fraction of the speed seen in open air. But cellars were not just holes in the ground, they were engineered spaces. Ventilation shafts controlled humidity. Stone walls absorbed excess moisture. Wooden racks allowed airflow around hanging meat. Every detail mattered. Winter slaughtering was another critical strategy. Animals were often killed when ambient temperatures were already low. Nature did the cooling instantly. Meat could be processed, salted, smoked, or fermented before warmth returned. Ice and snow were also tools. In colder regions, ice was harvested and stored in insulated pits. These ice houses preserved food months into summer. Again, no electricity, only physics and planning. Modern refrigeration gives the illusion of control, but it is fragile. Power fails, systems break, supply chains collapse. Medieval cold storage systems were passive. They didn't rely on machines, they relied on natural laws. Temperature was treated as a weapon against decay, and when combined with salt, smoke, and fermentation, it became devastatingly effective. Why modern meat fails so quickly? Modern meat fails not because we lack technology, but because of how we use it. Today's meat is optimized for profit, speed, and appearance. Longevity is an afterthought. Water is retained intentionally to increase weight. Mild curing preserves softness. Packaging prioritizes color and shelf appeal. These decisions create a moist, oxygen-rich environment where bacteria thrive. Refrigeration only slows decay, it does not stop it. Once meat leaves controlled temperatures, spoilage accelerates rapidly. This is why modern meat has expiration dates measured in days, not years. Contrast this with medieval systems, which assumed no refrigeration. Meat had to survive worst-case scenarios, and so it did. Modern systems are efficient but fragile. Medieval systems were slow but resilient. That difference explains everything. The experiment: medieval meat versus modern meat. To truly understand why medieval meat lasted so long, we must move beyond theory and into evidence. The experiment is simple but revealing. Place modern processed meat side by side with meat preserved using medieval techniques and observe what happens over time. What unfolds is not subtle. It is dramatic, uncomfortable, and deeply instructive. Modern meat begins its life already vulnerable. It is high in moisture, mildly salted, and packaged for appearance rather than durability. When exposed to air, even briefly, bacterial growth accelerates. Within days, sensory changes appear. The surface becomes slick, the smell shifts. Microbial colonies begin to dominate. This is not failure, it is expected behavior in a system designed for short-term use. Now compare that with medieval-style cured meat. Salted aggressively, smoked thoroughly, sometimes fermented, and dried slowly over weeks or months. The surface is firm, moisture content is low, the internal chemistry has changed. Bacteria encounter resistance at every level: lack of water, acidic conditions, antimicrobial compounds from smoke, and reduced oxygen exposure. Over time, the difference becomes undeniable. While modern meat enters rapid decay, medieval preserved meat remains stable. It does not smell rotten. It does not collapse in texture. Instead, it ages. Time becomes a neutral factor rather than an enemy. This experiment exposes a truth modern society prefers to ignore. Preservation is not about freezing food in time. It is about transforming food into a form that resists time. Medieval methods did exactly that. They didn't slow decay, they redirected it into stability. The results force us to confront a hard reality. Our modern food systems did not fail because medieval methods were inferior. They failed because we abandoned methods that prioritized survival in favor of methods that prioritize speed and convenience. The experiment proves one thing beyond doubt. Medieval preservation worked because it aligned with biology, and biology has not changed. What we lost when we chose convenience over resilience. At some point in history, humanity made a quiet trade. We traded resilience for convenience. We traded long-term security for short-term comfort. And nowhere is this trade more visible than in how we handle food. Medieval people lived close to risk. A failed harvest meant hunger. A spoiled storehouse meant death. Because of this, food preservation was treated as essential intelligence. It was taught, guarded, respected, and practiced with discipline. Knowledge was embodied, not outsourced. Modern society removed risk, or at least appeared to. Refrigerators, freezers, supply chains, and global logistics promised safety. Food became abundant, cheap, and accessible, but this abundance came with hidden fragility. When systems fail, skills are gone. When power disappears, knowledge does not return. We lost the ability to preserve without machines. We lost patience. We lost understanding. We lost respect for time as an ally. Food waste exploded as a result. Perfectly edible meat is discarded because it no longer fits industrial timelines. We throw away more food than medieval people could imagine producing. This is not efficiency, it is ignorance disguised as progress. The deeper loss, however, is psychological. We no longer see food as survival, we see it as product, and products are disposable. By choosing convenience, we created dependence. By abandoning resilience, we created vulnerability. Medieval systems were slow, but they were strong. Modern systems are fast, but they are brittle. That trade was never neutral, and we are still paying for it. Why this knowledge matters in the modern world. Some people dismiss medieval preservation knowledge as outdated or irrelevant. They see it as historical curiosity rather than practical intelligence. This assumption is dangerous. The modern world is interconnected, but that interconnection creates fragility. Supply chains stretch across continents. Power grids are vulnerable. Climate instability threatens agriculture. In such a world, knowledge that allows food to survive without electricity is not nostalgic, it is strategic. Preservation knowledge empowers individuals and communities. It reduces dependence on fragile systems. It transforms food from a short-lived commodity into a durable resource. This knowledge also changes our relationship with consumption. When food is preserved intentionally, it is valued differently. Waste decreases, planning improves, responsibility returns. Medieval preservation techniques remind us that humans once lived in balance with biological reality. They worked with decay instead of pretending it didn't exist. They respected limits, and that respect kept them alive. Relearning these systems does not mean rejecting modern technology. It means complementing it. It means having options. It means resilience. The future will belong not to the fastest systems, but to the systems that survive disruption. Medieval preservation methods were built for disruption. That is why they endured. Remembering what time could not destroy. Medieval meat did not last because people were stronger or smarter by nature. It lasted because survival demanded excellence. Every method was tested against hunger, winter, and time itself. Modern society forgot these lessons, not because they stopped working, but because we no longer felt the immediate consequences of forgetting them. Convenience softened urgency. Technology replaced understanding. But time has not changed. Biology has not changed. Decay has not changed. What has changed is our relationship with responsibility. This documentary is not about returning to the past. It is about remembering intelligence that once protected humanity from extinction, knowledge that allowed food to outlast hardship, wisdom that treated time as a partner instead of an enemy. And perhaps the most important lesson is this: anything worth preserving requires intention.